Hello, and welcome to More to the Story, what you need to know about abortion. And I'm your host, Molly White, and I am so glad that you joined me again today for another incredible podcast. Before I get started and introduce my awesome, wonderful co host, Mary, I would like to give a shout out to our show sponsor, Dr. Stephen Hotze with the Hotze Health and Wellness Center out of Katy, Texas. He's got an incredible center there that tries to keep all of his clients as healthy as possible, especially during flu season. And so, if you're interested in contacting him, I would encourage you to do so because it's nice to stay healthy and well. And then I would like to just invite you, if you would like to be a sponsor of this show, and be part of what we're doing for the cause of life, we invite you to do that. You can go to the operationoutcry.org website or to the More to the Story website, and there'll be a link there that would take you to where you can see our different show sponsorship packages. Pick one of those and let us know. So that would be awesome. And we're always open to taking donations as well. Because Mary and I think God has a lot of plans for us this coming year, this year, 2025, to go out into the world to do some live podcasts around the country. So any kind of financial donations will help us be able to do that. So I would like to introduce now my awesome, wonderful co-host, Mary Browning. So come on in, Mary.
Thank you, Molly. So good to be part of the show today. We do hope that any listeners that are out there, today we will have a story of abortion. And if you are a person that has abortion in your past, there may be something today that triggers you, that creates an emotional reaction. And if that happens, we'd like for you to see that as an invitation to the next level of healing. We want you to know that there is healing and hope available if you have abortion in your past, and you can contact the H3 helpline, 866-721-7881. They have people on staff 24/7. Somebody will answer your call, and the women that are answering the call has been in the position that you've been in. So you won't be judged. So we invite you to make that call. Thank you, Molly.
Well, thank you, Mary. And I just want to also interject that if you've had an abortion in your past and you've gone through healing and recovery, we kind of invite you to go to operationoutcry.org and fill out a declaration that is a questionnaire about your abortion experience. And these declarations are so helpful when we're dealing with legislation or lawsuits about abortion, so we can educate legislators and lawmakers about the harm that abortion caused us as individuals. And so we invite you to be part of that. I mean, it's amazing, Mary. You and I have had our declarations in many Supreme Court cases, and even used in legislative uh, um, when they have went for the word hearings. So we would educate lawmakers with that. So we'd invite you to be a part of that as well. It's really a huge thing. So, Mary, today's podcast is really, we're going to be talking about abortion and Christian women, abortion and the church. And from the last numbers that I recall, over 70% of all abortions are performed on women who profess to have some type of religious background. It could be Protestant, Catholic, evangelical, and it could be outside of other religion, other Christian religions as well. And so that was a real shocker to me when I learned that statistic. And of course, out of that 70%, most of them are women of faith, Christian women. And I just really couldn't understand why. For me, I was not a believer. I did not know and come to know the Lord till much later in life, but I couldn't understand why. But I think our guest today can give us some perspective on that. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce Cammie Hill, who's going to come in and kind of talk about her years growing up in a Christian family and share her testimony with us. So welcome to More to the Story with Molly White, Cammie.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us from beautiful Colorado. From what I hear, that you live in Colorado, and we're so grateful to have you on the show. And I just really feel this particular topic is a very important. Um, for not only reaching out to women who who are hurting from abortion, and then talking about abortion in the church, but maybe to educate pastors that
Mhm.
life is an issue that needs to be addressed regularly from the church, and the church needs to be a warm and welcoming place for women who may be facing an unplanned pregnancy in their church. So Cami, tell us a little bit about your personal experience of growing up, your childhood, and then, go forward from there.
Okay, I grew up, I was actually born overseas in Indonesia where my parents were missionaries. So from the day I was born, I was in a Christian family. And at the age of 6, I uh, dedicated my life to Christ.
Mm,
But, as even in Christian families, you have your dynamics. And one dynamic is being a missionary child, a child of missionaries. I went off to boarding school, and I was at boarding school 9 months out of the year. So
mm,
I only was with my parents 3 months of the year.
wow.
So I also, in a boarding school, there's a lot of rules, regulations, things that you have to do, expectations. And that kind of, my view of God became one of somebody with authority, someone, a judging God.
Mm,
Um, so that carried on in my life. And I had two other very situations that happened that really affected me. And one was my brother died when I was 10, and then my
mm.
mother died when I was 12.
Oh, wow.
So all of this I've learned since, my abortion. All of this kind of led and, you know, bringing on a need for love, a need, feeling abandoned, rejection. So, um, is that enough of my upbringing?
And that helps us kind of track along with you, and helps us with your mindset and with your
Oh,
life situation, because having some deep losses like that, you can understand why, like you said, you reaching out for comfort, from love, for
mhm.
acceptance, and sometimes um, we reach out in the wrong places, in the wrong ways.
Right, right. But during this whole time, I went to church. I did everything that, you would do as a believer. Um, then when I was 18, I went off to college. Well, my parents went back to Indonesia. I went to college in the US.
Mm,
And just the transition from being overseas to here is difficult. And then um, I go off to college. And after college, I meet someone. And I'm looking for love. I'm desperate for love because my parents are not around.
mm,
I do have a sister, but she's 13 years older. So she was over here much of the time that I was overseas. So I met up with a very wonderful young man. And 2 months later, I discovered that I have an unplanned pregnancy. And the emotions, and I've heard these emotions in young ladies at the pregnancy center
mhm,
of fear. Fear was the utmost, the strongest emotion. Shame, because I knew I had grown up in the church. I knew this wasn't supposed to happen. And of course, it happens because you have sex outside of marriage, which in the church, you're told, wait until you're married. And then guilt.
mm,
And so I was dealing with that. I didn't want to tell anyone. but the biggest thing that I dealt with was realizing how this would affect my dad. And to this day, I think because he was in ministry, I felt like his, it could really affect his career, his calling, his ministry. And so I thought, I can't have this child. I can't. It's going to affect my whole family. I don't know what to do. And at that time, which was 44 years ago, I had no idea there were pregnancy centers, and I don't know that there were any pregnancy centers available. But I did have somebody at work that had an abortion, and after the abortion, she seemed fine. So that was my go-to. I didn't ask anyone. I went in fear, and I just wanted the problem to disappear. And
Can I jump in here real quick, Cammie?
yeah.
So, fear is a huge, probably the main reason why women choose abortion. Is that right, Mary? Do you think the same thing?
Yes, I agree. Yes.
Mhm.
And of course, it's the worst time to make a decision. The worst decision making is based in fear,
Here.
because a lot of times our fears are really more than what they actually are. They don't always come to pass. But what I wanted to say is, when you went to have the abortion and you're afraid and probably uncertain, were you comforted? Were you counseled? Were you given options? Were you given time to think about these decisions, before you went through with the abortion?
No. I made an appointment. I went. Looking back, it's been 44 years. I don't even, there was no ultrasound.
Yeah.
I believe I was 8 weeks, not months, 8 weeks along. And no ultrasound. I remember at that time it was just surgical. The only option was surgical. So there was no talking about options.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't reach out to anybody other than Planned Parenthood.
Okay, so you went to Planned Parenthood, and did they explain the process to you? Did they explain that there could be some physical or psychological risks involved with the abortion? Did they introduce you to the abortionist prior to having the abortion?
No, either I blocked it all out, a lot of it out, but I remember just going. I was made an appointment. I went, I took myself. No one went with me. I remember going into this room, being put on this table, and hearing, the suction. And then, after staying there for a little while and then leaving, they did referred me to a doctor to get birth control pills.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it. Mm-hmm. Well, Mary has she has an interesting statistic on women and gestational gestational stages. You want to mention that, Mary? About how
I'm not.
about how we're not always sure how far along
Oh,
we are.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. What I have learned is that women are 50%. We're 50%. We're wrong about our guess of the gestational age. And so we know that now. So I think it's interesting that abortionists rely on the report of the woman and just make decisions based upon the woman's report, especially now that we know that women are often wrong about gestational age.
Right.
So,
and
I'm not saying that you were, but it's right. Common. Half of us are wrong.
Yeah. And I just thought it was a good time to interject that, because women who are listening, if you're listening and you think you're so far along,
Mhm.
you really need to have a pregnancy test. You need to have ultrasound. You need to see an OB-GYN doctor to be sure of your gestational age, because we can kind of
Mhm.
guess on our own, but like Mary said, more than 50% of the time we're wrong. But another interesting fact is that did Planned Parenthood run a pregnancy test on you? Did they do anything to try to find out exactly how far along you were, or did they just take your word for it?
I I did take a pregnancy test myself, and it was positive.
Mhm.
I don't recall them other than just looking maybe at the wheel or something. The taking my word is when the beginning of my last period was. I think that's what they went on.
Okay. And the reason I bring it up is just I want to educate our listeners and our viewers about um, the lack of medical professionalism in Planned Parenthood or other abortion providers. you know you couldn't go into a regular doctor's office for any kind of a procedure without going through tests and x-rays and lab work and
Mhm.
getting all the information you need prior to having a surgery or prior to be giving a dangerous drug, because they want you have to have full consent and they have to give you full disclosure of any possible
Mhm.
risks or
Mhm.
side effects. So that's kind of what I wanted to get across here during this conversation is to educate our viewers. So after your abortion, kind of take us to where how what that impact was on you after you had the abortion.
Okay, I left the abortion clinic, and the thought in my head was, no one needs to know about this ever,
Yeah.
ever. So I did get married and did not tell my husband. I ended up having two daughters, and the effects, but I didn't realize it was from the abortion.
Right.
The
Right.
effects, I had a lot of fear. I really feared God would punish me. Growing up in the church, that's the God I knew was a God that would punish. Or, that's the idea I had.
Mhm.
Not that the church gave me that idea, but that's the idea I had. And I just lived with a lot of fear. The fear continued. Uh, Something would happen to one of my daughters. I also dealt with depression, and I didn't understand my depression.
Mhm. Yeah.
There were two instances when I felt like committing suicide. I just felt like there was no hope.
Mhm.
And during this whole time, I'm going to church. But there was no one talking about abortion
Right.
or, the effects of abortion. And um, it was not until one day I saw an ad for volunteers at a pregnancy center, and I thought that is what this world needs, a pregnancy center.
Mhm.
And so I volunteered. I sent in my application, and on the application it said, "Did you have an abortion?"
Mhm.
And I continued to lie. I never told my gynecologist the whole
Wow.
time. I I said no because I figured I'm okay. By
Mhm.
this time, I my relationship with God had deepened, and I felt like I was forgiven, but yet it I was dealing with a lot of self condemnation.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not worthy,
Yeah. There's
and
a big difference that I want to interject here between
mhm,
forgiveness and healing. We can be
mhm,
forgiven of sin and the consequences of that sin. We're going to have to walk through the consequences of those sin. But there's a big difference from being forgiven, which we are when we repent, and being healed and delivered from the consequences of that sin. And so I just want to interject that because I felt the same. And I don't have a problem.
Mhm. Mhm.
So then
Yeah,
you volunteered for a pregnancy resource
I
center.
I did, and I shadowed because they didn't want anyone serving on the floor by themselves without going through type of healing. But they did not know yet that I had had an abortion. But I had to go through training, and two ladies got up that had had abortions, and the looks on their faces and the freedom that I saw, I thought, and that was the first time I'd heard anyone talk about abortion and possibly healing. And right away I knew I need that. I don't have that freedom. I I need that. And so I went to the volunteer coordinator and came clean. I said, I've had an abortion. I did lie. And she was so loving and kind. And I think that really, I hadn't felt that in the church, in, just that you can have a chance to volunteer. And so, but she said you have to go through forgiven and set free before you can volunteer. And
Amen.
I went through that Bible study. It's a 9-week study. By the end, I was free. I was free.
Amen.
And it
The whole
was not,
purpose for that. The whole purpose for that title, we're forgiven and God will set us free
yeah.
from the bondage, of sin and transgression. Mary, do you have anything you'd like to comment on?
I was just thinking about the listeners and whether or not, so forgiven and set free is actually a healing, it's a healing module, correct? I mean, it's a program, a specific program. So if there's someone out there that's listening, how would you encourage them, Cami, to start their healing journey if they haven't begun?
Oh, there's so many different, good programs out there, recovery programs, which I do help with the helpline. So I really encourage that if they're willing. We're very careful, but um,
So do you want to, for our listeners, they may not know what the helpline is. Can you tell them about
okay,
that, Tammy?
sure, sure. It's actually the H3 helpline, and I have been with them 5 years, and we do answer the call 24/7, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, all day long. And we get all different calls, all different types of calls. And it's just a place where you can feel safe. It's confidential. And we've been there. We can help them. We can't do the healing for them. And sometimes I feel like they want us to do that healing, give them the thing that will help them,
Just say that word that
quickly.
heals me. Yeah, yeah.
Right,
So
to quickly
the
help them. It takes time.
Yeah. So the H3 helpline is a helpline for abortion-minded women, women who've been hurt by abortion,
Mhm.
women who are, questioning. So what is that? Are there more scenarios involved with that?
That is probably it. We do get calls from males, but we try to direct them. We have someone that is a male that can talk to them. But those are mainly the ones that call, or a
So if
family member.
mhm. So I just want to stop right here and say, hey, if you're pregnant and you're afraid and you're feeling shame and guilt and regret about this and you're thinking about having an abortion, look, the three of us on this podcast today have been there. We've been in those shoes.
Mhm.
And I want to encourage you to stop right now, reach out to the H3 helpline. It's 866 721 7881. It'll be the best call you've ever made in your life, especially when you're dealing with this fear, this shame, this guilt of maybe being pregnant outside of marriage. We want they want to help you. They've walked in your shoes, and there is help and hope for you right now in this situation. So I just want to encourage you to take that step. So Cammie, we just have a few minutes left,
Mhm.
and we were talking about, in particular, young women growing up in the church, Christian family, Christian values, and then facing an unplanned pregnancy. Cammie, there is someone that's listening or watching us right now who's in that
Mhm.
situation. She's 14 years old, maybe
Mhm.
50, and she got pregnant. Her parents are strong believers, very involved in the church, could even be pastors. What would you
Mhm.
say to this young woman?
I would look her in the eye and just tell her, take your time. Don't make any rash decision, and look for a pregnancy center. You know, look, they are there. The pregnancy centers are there to help support anyone, even if it's talking to your parents, just giving you that strength to talk to your parents. Our parents, being a parent, our first, as a parent, your parents' first response will not possibly be the best, but give them time
Yeah.
to process this and just know that you are loved, that God loves you, and God has a plan for you. And there's so many people that have been in your situation that have had their babies and they would never, they're so glad they made that decision. But just give yourself time and be educated before you make any decision. And do not be pressured by a boyfriend or even your
Parent.
parent,
Yeah. Yeah.
even your parent.
Amen. That is excellent advice. Mary, do you have anything you want to add?
I was just thinking that, I'm an adoption attorney, and what I have learned with the adoption is that it's really changed and it's different than it was many
Mm,
years ago. Now there's such things as open adoption. So if you are one of those people you're unexpectedly pregnant and you don't see yourself in a position as being able to parent, please know there are options where you can actually choose the family, and you can make a plan to safely turn over your baby to a new family that you select. And you can even continue to stay involved in some ways with that baby if you want, where you can get pictures or stay updated or maybe get text messages. So there's lots of ways. We call it open adoption. So years ago, open adoption was not an option, but now open adoption is actually the common uh, process for adoption. And that open just means your baby would know you and you would know your baby, as well as the adoptive parents. I just want to mention that to our listeners in case you're unfamiliar with adoption. It is also a good choice, and you can give your baby life and also move on with your life if you're not in a position to parent. So thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
mm,
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Mary, because that's really important for young women to know, and that, adoption it just doesn't have the trauma that abortion
right.
carries. Adoption, you
Mm,
always, like you said, you have the option of staying involved in your child's life if you choose to do that, or the opportunity to meet your child later in life if that's the door that God opens for you. But you'll know
mm,
that your child is loved and taken care of and enjoying life. And in the abortion route, it's permanent. There's no
mm,
do-overs. There's no another baby won't replace that child. But thank you, Cammie, for encouraging this young woman who I know is listening today, and that she's afraid, and then when you tell your parents, they may be afraid and they may be disappointed,
right.
but most of the time they're going to come around and they're going to help you. There's times where, they might be trying to react out of fear or disappointment, but don't let them pressure you into
Mhm.
doing something that not only will you regret, but they will regret too in the long run. So we just want you to stand strong. We want you to reach out to the Help 3 number, the H3 helpline number, if you're facing this unplanned pregnancy, and reach out to a pregnancy resource center. There's always someone out
Mhm.
there who can help you and help you talk, uh, be an intermediary, help you talk with your parents if you need to, or your boyfriend, whatever the situation may be. But the important thing to remember is there's always hope and help out there for you. So if you're pregnant and you're unsure, you're afraid, reach out to someone for help, and not help in choosing abortion, because that's really not helping. Well,
Mhm.
thank you, Tammy, and thank you, Mary, and thank you all for joining in this podcast today. And please talk to your pastor. Tell him how important
Mhm.
it is
Mhm.
to address the importance of healing from abortion in your church. You don't know how many women and men are suffering in silence, holding on to this deep secret that they need to know that they can turn it, they can speak about it, they can turn it loose, they can reach out for hope and healing and forgiveness. And be that safe place for people in your church, because let me tell you, they're out there. They're out there, and they need their pastors to say, hey, if you had an abortion in your past, this is a place for you to come for prayer, and we can help you go through a healing process. So anyway, that's my 10 cents worth on my soapbox. And we thank you for joining in, and we look forward to seeing you again next time on More to the Story with Molly White. God bless. Bye-bye.
Mm.